Thank you so much for having me. I would love to thank the International Holistic Missions Conference and Diana Mood and Terry Graham and Dr. Ravi Jakaran for the endorsement. And hasn't this been a phenomenal conference thus far? I love the praise and worship team. Love listening to you. So thank you so much. Let's give them another hand. So I am a prolific reader. One of my favorite authors is John Maxwell. John Maxwell has written about over 60 books on leadership. And he said that the two most important days in a person's life is the day they were born and the day they discovered why. Let me repeat that again. The two most important days in a person's life is the day they were born and the day they discovered why. Psalm 139, verse 16 says, "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God had before ordained that we should walk in them." We all have amazing gifts and abilities, and when we identify it and put it to use, can help us to leave our own mark in this world, prayerfully leaving this world better than how we found it. I actually have never had the opportunity, as a few days before my birth, I was almost euthanized. I was born in 1974, so for those mathematicians out there, I am 43. Wow, I can feel the gray hairs popping up already and the wrinkles forming. I was abandoned a few days after my birth and brought to the Kasturba Medical College in the cover of darkness in the middle of the night. I was left at the maternity ward, and the nurses found me one early morning. And I was told that I was presented at a case conference where the head of pediatric medicine told his staff to euthanize me. He believed that my body would weaken and die, and I would ultimately die of a hospital infection. Out of all the Hindu doctors, the Lord had one Christian doctor who adamantly stood up and protested that euthanasia was illegal and immoral, and that God had a purpose for my life. I learned that the Indian culture, that disabled babies are literally thrown away, just thrown in the garbage like trash. But someone cared enough about me to bring me to the Kasturba Medical College. Typically, the abandoned babies are left on the street. And every morning the police come and they bring the physically normal infants to orphanages. However, orphanages are overcrowded, unlike here in Western civilization, so the disabled babies are just thrown away. Well, the hospital then put the challenge onto Dr. George. They literally washed their hands of me and said that I had too gross of a handicap and nothing could be done for me over in India. Dr. George, through his medical contacts, knew of the Ramabai Mukti mission in Kedgaon. And Dr. George was neat. I had the opportunity to meet him a couple of years ago. He serves on my board of directors. And he said that the nurses were very empathetic and they gave him powdered milk and cloth napkins for the journey. He said that the Hindu nurses gave me the name Lika, which means writer in the Marathi language. And I ended up earning a journalism degree in 1999 from Regent and did not know the meaning of my name until 2008. So I thought that was very interesting that the Lord used Hindu nurses into speaking into my life. Isn't that amazing? Dr. George and another intern traveled 37 hours by 2 buses and 2 trains through 4 major cities to bring me to Mukti. And when I met Dr. George, I asked him, so what memories do you remember of the journey? He says, I really can't recall too much. The only memory he can remember are 2 bachelors traveling with a little infant. He carried me in a basket, and all the passengers asking him questions, where's the mother? You know, why are you traveling with her? And he explained that I had been abandoned. And the only memory he can recall is throwing out soiled diapers out the window along the journey, along the bus and train. And apparently, Dr. Gita was one of the physicians at the Rambai Mukti mission. When I met her too at the same time, she said, you brought Manyata to me really smelly. And apparently the bachelors didn't think to clean off the baby before presenting her at the mission. And I lived at the Ramabai Mukti Hospital for about 3.5 years. And then I was transitioned into one of the cottages, the Lotus family. And they changed my name from Lika to Manyata, which means acceptance in the Marathi language, meaning that they accepted me into their family. The Ramabai Mukti officials has various councils throughout the world. They brought me actually to Bombay, which was the capital of India at the time, and the Hindu doctors once again said nothing could be done for me over in India. After the medical assessment, the Ramabai Mukti mission decided to reach out to Hopetown Residential Christian School. One of their board members of the American Council had established a school for disabled children and adults whose parents either couldn't take care of them or didn't want them. So Mukti's plan was for me to come over to the United States. They thought I would need more medical attention than I've ever needed, live at Hopetown, and return to India at the age of 18. But the Lord had other plans for my life, and he had all medical visas expire. And the only way for me to come to the United States was if someone adopted me. And my mom, the director of the school, Marie Olson, had been praying about the possibility of adopting me for 6 months and hadn't told anyone. And my mom at that time was almost 51 years old. She was single, she had never married, she was engaged when she was younger, but the word adopt kept coming into my mom's mind, and she kept pushing it out. And one day, out of the blue, a letter came with her name in it. And in the letter, it explained my dire situation, and it said, would Miss Olson or someone at Hopetown consider adopting Manyata? And my mom couldn't argue with the Lord any longer. She knew that that was from him. So a couple weeks later, my mom went to see an attorney. She knew of one of her friends who had adopted a son who had arms but didn't have legs. And so she asked Karen for her attorney. And so she went, drove all the way to Long Island, New York, and the attorney was seated behind a desk. And she said to him, I have a couple of questions for you. And he said, sure. She says, well, you know, I'm 50, I'm almost 51, and I don't know if that's too old to adopt. And he said, 10 years ago, that would have mattered. Today, that doesn't matter. And he says, do you have any other questions? And she's like, well, you know, I'm single, I've never married, and will that be a problem? And he says, no, 10 years ago, that would have mattered. Today, that doesn't matter. And he says, do you have any other questions for me? And she's like, well, no, that pretty well covered it, you know. And he said to her, "Do you love this little girl?" And she thought for a moment, and she said, "Yes, I do love her." Apparently, my mom had seen a black and white photo of me winking, and that seemed to melt her heart. So a few weeks later, she was on her way to India. And I have repressed all the memories of being at Mukti and the Indian language and culture. I only know 2 words in the Marathi language, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, the American version, but it's parne, meaning water, and dood, meaning milk. And so my mom always said that she didn't know if I had a brain or a half a brain. She didn't know my intellectual capabilities until she brought a tape recorder over. And I always said to my mom that, "Wow, Mom, I loved you on the first day." And she says, "Well, maybe the third. You didn't really like me." Apparently, they woke me up in the middle of the night to greet my new mother. And for anyone who knows me, I do not like to wake up early or in the middle of the night. And they surprised me and brought me to the airport. And her guardian at the time, or translator, sat me on her lap. And I looked up at her, and Mom's trying not to scare me, and said, "Hi, honey," and I looked up at her and gave her a dirty look. And, but then my mom brought a tape recorder, and apparently I like to hear my own voice. And so I would sing into the tape recorder, and then one day we were looking into a mirror, and my mom says to me, "Say, hello, funny kid." And I looked in the mirror and said, "Hello, pretty kid." And she says, "Oh, wow, this one's a Sharpie." And then we were on our way back to Bombay and to the airport, and we were on a train, and we were going over a body of water. And I looked out the water and said, "As clear as a bell, water." And my mom said, "Wow, you do know how to speak English." And I said, "Parne, parne, parne," because I didn't want her to know it. For some reason, I learned to speak English. She was like, "Never mind, parne, parne. I heard you say water." And I had a very normal childhood. I had phenomenal cousins and 2 aunts and an uncle and amazing friends. One of my childhood friends came with me today and for the conference. And a lot of my friends and family have forgotten of my disability. And so it's interesting. I kind of have a disability sense of humor. One of my cousin-in-laws, when she married my cousin Paul, and I came home, we know that all women love a sale. We all love a bargain, going shopping. And she came home, she said to Paul, "You know, I bought these 3 pairs of socks. One for, your mom, one for your sister Jennifer, and one for your cousin Lisa." And my cousin Paul said, "You bought a pair of socks for my cousin Lisa?" And she had only met me one time. And she says, "Yeah, don't you think she'll love it?" And he looks at her, and his mouth fell open and said, "Robin, my cousin Lisa doesn't have any feet." And the funny part of the whole story was my family told me as soon as it happened, but Robin had said, "Please, please don't tell, Lisa." She didn't know, but my family knew that I would think it was a riot. And so after 10 years of knowing her, I finally said, "I want to let you in on a secret. I've known all along that you bought me a pair of socks." And then one of my school aide actually, my mom often had a propensity of utilizing a nail file as a bookmark in my textbooks. And my school aide opened up my textbook one time and said, "Whose nail file is this? It's not mine. It must be yours." And I took a look at my little arm and said, "Wow, my nails are getting really long." And it's funny, I work at Regent, and I would carry files, and I hold objects in my neck and chin, and carry files, and drove my wheelchair along. And it's funny, I sometimes forget that I have a disability. And so would open the elevator button, press the button, and sometimes the door would close right away, and I would stick my little leg into the elevator door, and then I realized, I thought, you know, I don't really want to cut off the little leg or decapitate the little leg and be even more limbless. So maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. And then I had just fun stories with my cousin. I would have my favorite cousin, Paul, pick me up and lift me up as weights and go and count 1, 2, 3 every time he picked me up. So for the next few minutes, I would like to talk about how sometimes we marginalize ourselves, or often we marginalize other people. Now, according to Google, the definition of marginalization is to keep someone in a powerless or unimportant position or in a group. What did we ever do without Google, right? And what are the ways that we often marginalize someone else? Well, number one point, we have discrimination. I can't begin to tell you how many jobs I applied for before landing my position at Regent. I was a standard, typical undergrad student who directly came out of undergrad into grad school, and I did lack the professional experience. I had more the educational background. However, my disability played a major role in not being able to secure employment. I wish I had counted. This would have been very interesting to incorporate into my autobiography, but I must have applied for at least 200 positions. Every time someone said to me, you should apply for a position in DC or a nonprofit organization in Colorado Springs, I followed every lead. And finally, the Lord gave me the opportunity through a former professor, and whom I had met, interestingly, at Applebee's. So I always tell my students, go to the Applebee's off of Kempsville Road if you want to look for a job. And he remembered. So interestingly, I had submitted my resume at Regent, and what I learned is that my resume literally floated throughout the campus and landed 10 months later on my former professor's desk I had for one summer school class. And he picked up the resume. It was actually, I have to say, the most challenging summer school class. Made an A with the Lord's help, and I still utilize a lot of the principles I learned, but he literally picked up the resume and said, oh, Lisa, I wonder if she is still job searching. And he had just created the admissions and recruitment assistant at Regent. So discrimination is definitely one area where the disabled often have issues. Second point would be in my life is rejection. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've been rejected by men or by other people. And it's interesting, when I do public speaking, I love to share fun disability stories and have an icebreaker, and I love to laugh. But I have a desire to be married, and I can't begin to tell you how many times I've had my heart broken. And so if you know of a good, godly man who's about 43, who loves the Lord, you might want to reach out. Well, the opposite of rejection, I believe, is love. And also, another area is often we stereotype employed disabled people. It's interesting that the Lord has given me the opportunity to be as self-sufficient as possible. Yes, I do require caregiving help. I need help with personal care and getting ready in the morning for work and getting ready for bed at night. But I am self-sufficient in the office. And interestingly, because I work full-time, I am not eligible for any governmental assistance. And so it's interesting, the Lord's provided, but in my instance, for 9 years, I was a part of a state-funded program where I had to manage my own caregiving, because I'm not eligible for Medicaid or Social SSI or Social Security, and so it made it very challenging, and I was told that I was the 1% where this program wasn't functional. 99% the program, for the reason is that I don't have family in the area to help me. This program, so basically for 9 years, and actually a little longer because I simultaneously coordinated my mom's caregiving, I didn't know for 9 years often who was even going to help me the next morning. And so I was in emergency mode for years and years, but I was telling some colleagues of mine prior to the session that the Lord always provided for me in the middle of the night. And I received a text from a caregiver and said, "Oh, I'm sick, could you help me?" And I'm thinking, oh no, you're my backup. So you're my backup, that means I don't have anybody else to come and help me in the morning. But I just, in those moments, had to turn it over to the Lord and say, Lord, you know I need somebody and to be able to utilize the restroom and get up tomorrow morning, and I'm just going to leave this in your hands. And of course, at midnight, everybody's sleeping, and so nobody is answering their phone. And so I had to go to bed not knowing who was coming in the morning. And at 3 a.m., a former caregiver was getting off at her second job and looked at her text and sent me a text at 3 a.m. saying, "Oh, hi Lisa, getting off of work. I can come and help you in the morning." So God provides even at 3 a.m. And so it's amazing. And so definitely putting people, employed people into a label. And then also too, another way that we often marginalize people, not just the disabled, but physically normal, are the naysayers. What I refer to as the naysayers are those who are constantly speaking negative words over our lives. I affectionately like to call them the dream killers, because they're always the ones who say, you can't pursue that dream or passion. When I was interested in starting Magneta Ministries, I had a couple different people who said, well, that's nice that you want to pursue motivational speaking, but if you can't find a caregiver to help you at home, how are you going to find someone to travel with you? But I felt this was God's calling, and He's opened up someone each and every time for me. And then often, not only do other people marginalize us, but we often marginalize ourselves. One of my other favorite authors is Max Lucado, and I love this quote. It says, "You change your life by changing your heart." The past several years has been just grueling for me. I have felt like I have undergone heart surgery. My mom went to be with the Lord, but was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I had to make the painful decision to put her into a nursing home. Well, she was my biggest supporter and rock, and that just nearly devastated me. And but in those moments, I've had to learn that the Lord is my God and that He's my anchor and my source of strength. And I have struggled for years with anxiety and depression. And I even had a suicide attempt. And I'm thankful that the Lord saved my life and that I'm here speaking with all of you. And I believe that He has a purpose and a plan for each of us. I believe that we don't always know that we are uniquely gifted, and sometimes we possess a bad mindset. In John 10:10 says that the enemy comes to steal and destroy, but He has come that we may have life and have it more abundantly. You may feel often, this is another area that we marginalize ourselves, you may have a health issue or a financial struggle, and you feel like, man, I want to pursue a degree in college or grad school, and but just I have a disability or a physical impairment and prevent me. Well, I want to tell you that with God, all things are possible, and my dream was to pursue a degree, was to graduate from college and to drive a van. Let me tell you about this van. It was amazing. It was my passion and dream for almost 20 years. And the equipment was so high tech, I felt like when I drove the van, and that it was a lot like a cockpit of an airplane. And I always said that my driving instructor should work for DMV because there wouldn't be any more automobile accidents ever again. And another area that often we marginalize ourselves is fear. And it affects all socioeconomic stratas. And fear, if we allow it to, can debilitate us. So don't let fear cripple you, but allow it to propel you to the calling that God has on your life. I love this quote also by Max Lucado in the book Traveling Light. It says, "Fear is worry's big brother. And if fear is a burlap bag, fear is a trunk of concrete and it won't budge." Another favorite author of mine is Joyce Myers, and she once stated, "Battles are fought in our minds every day. When we begin to feel the battle is just too difficult and want to give up, we must choose to resist negative thoughts and be determined to rise above our problems. We must decide that we're not going to quit. When we're bombarded with thoughts and fears, doubts and fears, we must take a stand and say, I'll never give up. God is on my side. He loves me and he's helping me and I'm going to make it." Sometimes you have to struggle with your decision, even when the fear of making the right decision. Remember Dr. Corvilla George, the young intern in pediatric medicine who was only, I want to say about 24, could have sat there and said in his seat, well, nobody's going to listen to me, and I'm young, I'm just an intern. But no, he adamantly, as we know, stood up and protested that euthanasia was illegal and immoral and that God had a purpose for my life. So don't allow fear to prevent you from making ethical and moral decisions. We know in Jeremiah 29:11 that it says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." And we know that Romans 8:28 says, "All things work together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose." So what will you do? Will you join us on this journey? I challenge you to be an advocate for the marginalized populations. We are all created for a significant purpose. Another author in closing, Anne Voskamp, stated, "The brave who focus on all things good and all things beautiful and all things true, even in the small, who give thanks for it and discover joy, even in the here and now. They are the change agents who bring fullest light to all the world." Thank you so much for having me.